Namaskar, hello everyone. We've been broadcasting here from Switzerland in Burgenstock. There's the Path to Peace Summit to try and find a resolution to the Russia-Ukraine war that's been ongoing now for 2 years and more and counting. Let's just try and get in a sense of what's really happening here. It's day 2 and the final day of the conference. President Zelensky, American Vice President Kamala Harris, amongst all the 57 heads of states, the prominent leaders who have assembled here, around 100 in fact confirmed delegations, including international organizations. And I have Lotte Crank Vandubor. She is with the Finnish broadcaster. And I also have with me here Bogdan Supin. He's working for the Voice of America Ukrainian Services. Many thanks for joining us here. Bogdan, if we could start with you. You are an Ukrainian yourself, but of course you're based in London.
Yes.
In London and covering the story. What really is your hope? Because a lot of questions have been asked about the conference, given the fact that Russia was not invited to the room, China is not there, India has not had a political representation but has sent in a senior diplomat.
I think when we are talking about this conference or peace summit, as Ukrainians like to call it, we should really keep in mind that expectations of Ukrainians are very high because they are suffering the war, they are under constant bombardments. So what they really want is for the war to stop immediately and for Russia to get back home immediately. And this is something that obviously this conference cannot achieve. So for many Ukrainians and people connected to Ukraine, the main task is to lower expectations at this moment at least and to be realistic. What can be achieved here? And main, I think, hope for Ukrainian officials and for Ukrainian president is to gather as many countries as possible on the side of Ukrainian calls for just peace.
But till such time that the Russians don't come into the negotiating table in the room, you have 3 plenary sessions lined up today discussing subjects of freedom of movement, food supply, which is still doable. But when you talk about swap between prisoners, between children, or nuclear safety, how do you really talk about these issues without Russia being in the room?
Today we were reminded that, for example, Russian President Vladimir Putin could not have been invited to Switzerland because he is suspected war criminal, and international court announced an order for his arrest. Switzerland is the part of Rome Statute, is part of international court, and personally Mr. Putin cannot be here as suspected war criminal. But obviously when it comes to the issues of actual peace negotiations, yes, Ukraine will have to speak to Russia. At the moment, what we have now, these are not peace negotiations. This is a peace conference where countries exchange their views and deciding main directions.
So hopefully maybe there will be some sort of a direction or seeds sown of a future, in fact, negotiations possibly between the two warring sides. Lotte, give me your perspective. You're Finnish, and Finland, of course, has its own fears looming large with whatever has happened between Russia and Ukraine. What is the mood on the ground in your country?
Well, I have to say that everybody was...
Yeah, if you could come here.
I have to say that everybody was quite shocked in Finland as in other countries when Russia invaded Ukraine. And, of course, the first thought, I think, in everybody's heads it could have been us, because we have a history with Russia, and we have a very long, very long and difficult history, let's say it like that, with Russia. And shock was the first thing, I have to say. And now I think Finns are more afraid than before of Russia, because it feels like we don't really know where we have, Vladimir Putin, what he could still do after, the invasion of Ukraine. So I think we're more wary of Russia. We're bit more, afraid of our big neighbor in the east. So I think these are the sentiments in Finland.
Remember, of course, when Russia invaded Ukraine, one of the arguments being given was that it was being threatened by NATO and its expansion. Now, we have had other, in fact, countries in the Baltic region, the Scandinavians, who have applied, who have become NATO members too. So for Finland, is this a catch-22 situation? I mean, you become a NATO member, it provides you more alliance security within also particularly within the European framework, but it also sort of adds to the provocation, the excess of Russia.
Yes, well, I think we were quite aware of the fact that this will provocate Russia. But I think the thought of, being more secure, having like NATO behind us after the invasion of Ukraine was more important to Finland. And I have to say also, in Finland, I think a lot of people were against NATO before, but after, the invasion of Ukraine, this sentiment changed, and more people, turned towards like NATO and thought it was a good idea to join NATO because it gives us a sort of security, and we're hoping that it, of course, could be a factor if Russia ever thinks about, starting to look at Finland that way. That it would be a factor that NATO is behind us, and it would make it more difficult.
So a possible deterrent you're hoping for.
Yes, exactly. That's it. And of course, we know that Russia has been very annoyed by the fact that Finland has joined NATO. But as I said, the security, I think, is more important. The sense of security for us is more important.
Right. Bogdan, also there are reports that perhaps there is going to be a joint declaration of sort. Now, we don't really know the details at this point in time. We will only get to see whether there is a joint communique and whether all parties involved finally sign on it or some choose to stay away from it. Have you picked up anything on what possibly the communique could offer at this point?
Well, we know that some of our colleagues already seen the draft, and I think, as with the beginning of this conference, the question is what kind of wording is going to be in the document, because we saw at the beginning in the speeches some representatives even avoided the word war, some avoided mentioning Russia, some completely avoided mentioning invasion, aggression. So in the end, it's just going to be a declaration. It's just a piece of paper. But the kind of words we're going to see there would show how many countries are joining the vision of the just peace, as we hear very often here.
From you, very quickly, what are your expectations from the joint communique?
Well, I think that, as I said this, or I've said this before, that this meeting is more like symbolic. It's like more a show that the world is behind Ukraine, and I think this is also what we'll show in the communication, and that's, I think, also that Ukraine has been very aware that you can't start a peace process here because the other party is not here to discuss it, and as you said, Ukraine needs to talk to Russia to have a peace process. So I think it's more kind of the support that Ukraine was after with this meeting, and I think that will also be very clear in this communique.
Thank you so much for speaking to us here, Bogdan and Lotte. And let me just try and show you a little bit of the background here, in case if it's possible, because clearly, it's the summit is low expectations, is low-key at the moment, but just the hope that perhaps in the months to come, because there is, in the middle of summer, the fear of another long winter looming over Ukraine, and Ukrainians' lives being, lost, innocent lives being lost, people being displaced. But let's hope that the path to peace is able to find at least some sort of a platform in future where Russia and Ukraine are able to sit together to try and negotiate the future. Here in Burgenstock, I'm Smita Sharma. Thanks for tuning in.